Welcome back to Satori Sounds, the podcast that invites you to unwind, relax, and explore the deeper currents of life. Today, Josh and I dive into the art of staying consistent. We explore how setting strong boundaries, making steady incremental progress, and building resilience through challenges all fuel your ability to show up day after day. We've got insights into self-talk, family narratives, and the power of compassionate communication. This conversation is going to give you a practical guide to building the kind of consistency that will help you transform both your personal and professional life. We hope you enjoy.
It is a very important boundary to set. Why do you want to spend time talking about something? Well, is it mutually beneficial to me? Is it mutually beneficial to you? And actually, it comes back to that idea that we wanted to talk about today, this idea of consistency, because people can really derail your attempts at being consistent. Sometimes not deliberately, sometimes people do by accident, but that you have to monitor that. And part of being really consistent is monitoring who you've got around you, kind of what's their agenda, why are they doing what they're doing, and what's your agenda? Does it align or does it not align?
100%. And that's because everyone's got these different kind of competing interests and demands, right? That's just where we are in society and things we work through. And a lot of people won't necessarily be aligned with where you're going and, what your views are or what you're trying to achieve. You have that very often in work. I work across multiple projects, and actually I can't just allocate a whole day for a certain project. The reality just doesn't exist. I can't say, right, today I'm only working on this. And so you have to allocate that time aside and protect it, because people will just kind of come crashing in. And I think it's really hard to consistently keep on top of that, because there's so many competing demands that we have day to day, and actually you can't plan for everything. Stuff will happen, but you do have to set those boundaries with people. I do it every Tuesday morning between 9 and 12. I take no meetings. That's the strategy morning. I'm revisiting, I'm refocusing. Mondays, everyone knows they can fill my calendar with meetings. Tuesday mornings is a no-go zone. And without those boundaries, you can't progress. From what I've found, you can't really make good progress to where you want to go.
Yeah. And I think it's one of the things you have to remember about people generally is that not every action that they do is malicious, and selfishness inherently isn't necessarily malicious in intention. Sometimes people want to have a problem solved, so they'll push and they'll push and they'll push and they want to take more of your time, or maybe they need soothing. And one of the things I've always struggled to balance in my life is when you're putting in that boundary, it's remembering that sometimes people aren't doing it to undermine you or be difficult or to be challenging, in terms of trying to take your time, that is. Sometimes they're doing it because they genuinely want help, but it's also remembering you don't have to give your piece to do that. And that's partly what this boundary is about. You don't have to sacrifice your goals just because someone's being a bit selfish, maliciously
100%.
or not.
100%. And that it's very easy to see that in the moment, right? But that's also, I think, if people mistake a lot that you've got to go and spend 12 hours revising immediately or 12 hours working flat out on this project. Otherwise, you're not making progress. And actually, if we take the podcast, we started an hour every week, didn't we, of just building, right? And now we've got this momentum from it. Then what we created in that first 3 months of having nothing to actually launching the podcast, if we'd broken that down and tried to just smash it all out in one go, it would never have happened, right? But I think if we look at it, I don't think either of us realised how much momentum we gained in those 3 months. Now, looking back, it's easy to do that now because we're doing it every week. But in that moment, you don't really see that progress. It's a bit muddy in that sense.
Yeah. And I think just remembering that progress is incremental. And one of the mantras I often think about when I'm setting my goals is the biggest adversary to achievement is fantasy. As soon as you start dreaming of all these juicy little accolades and the finished product and this and that and everything else, you are falling into a pit of not moving forward because you're fantasizing and you're trying to forever improve the next step, but you haven't even done step one. So I always try and remember that fantasy is the biggest adversary to achievement.
100%. It almost falls into that same camp of meetings, doesn't it? Right? Like you're being busy for the sake of busy sake. It's almost this procrastination of thinking the next thing or trying to get it bigger or become something else. And actually, sometimes you just need to do the thing. Whatever that is, just get on with it.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a very good working dynamic where we just say 2 minute jobs. Is it a 2 minute job? Yeah, do it now. Just get it done. What's holding you back?
So good. And it's such a simple tool. It's such a simple tool, right? And for people who don't know the 2 minute task, it basically, I've found that you can pretty much break everything down into, even if it's just getting started, a 2 minute task of something. And so instead of letting all these little actions build up, what we do together is if there's something quick where it's, I don't know, we just need to tweak a logo or we're just sorting out a bit of an edit on something, we'll just go 2 minute task and get it done. And actually, it stops all those little tasks building up and allows us to keep clear and focused on the bigger stuff, doesn't it?
Yeah, I definitely feel that. It's a real game changer, particularly if you're a person who procrastinates. The other alternative that I've heard, and I got this from Naval Ravikant, one of the things that he says is work out your hourly rate. Does the thing that you need to do, does it equate to less than your hourly rate? If it does, crack on, do it. And if not, then you need to set that time and plan it properly. So yeah, it's those kind of approaches. They're real game changers, I find. And again, it's kind of being a bit mindful, catching yourself. Why am I not doing this? Just do it.
We can all get caught up in the urgent stuff, right? You were talking about that a minute ago, someone calling you or someone pushing else they want, or an email's pinged up. Oh, I'll just go and do this, right? But that can actually prevent progress in itself because there's this old Eisenhower matrix around like urgent and important tasks and kind of its task prioritization.
Yeah.
And I've seen this all too many times and been guilty of it myself. Is you'll get to the end of the day and you're like, oh, that's like I've done lots. But actually, all you've done is you've sat in that corner of urgent, right? And it's just urgent stuff that you've been firefighting all day. And actually, the thing that's really going to move the needle towards your goals is the important stuff that you haven't worked on. And so you need to be mindful in that sense of being aware and saying, hold on a second. Am I spending my time now intentionally on the thing that's going to move me forward? And that awareness piece of that, because that I think is the biggest bit for a lot of people. We can all think of, we've just gone through a day and you've gone, what did I actually do in that day?
Yeah, what you said is absolutely right about prioritizing and I suppose making what's important to you there, identifying what's important to you and moving forward with that. One of the things you've always also got to be aware is that we do these in a social context, and sometimes what's a priority to you isn't going to be a priority to someone else and vice versa. And you've got to battle those competing priorities. And that's where it can get really, really challenging. And one of the things I would always say is whatever it is you're doing, you're going to have to develop some inner resilience. You have to be able to sometimes push back and get a little pushed back. And that's really challenging to do. And we develop that inner resilience often throughout our lives. And sometimes some people will look back in their childhood and think really early on, when have I ever struggled to be pushed back or to do the pushing? And that can be a challenging space to operate in.
Massively. Absolutely. You can't be completely selfish, and we've talked about setting boundaries before, right? But you can't be completely selfish and just say I'm working on my own goals, etc. But what you can do is a bit like I mentioned earlier. You can just set that time with people and say, look, actually, if you need meetings with me, you want me to do stuff, let's find a time that works that you can have that time. But also, I then therefore need to respect on another day. I need some time to work on what I'm working on. And I've looked at it as well with energy levels. I'm more of like a morning person, right? And we've talked about this as well with you being left alone in the morning. But we have our own kind of balances that way, right? And I like making decisions early in the morning. I'll get going, make all the big decisions then, and by the afternoon, I'm completely fatigued. And so actually understanding that kind of boundary with people as well, I've got a couple of people I work with who they want to do as much as they can in the morning to be able to get out the door earlier as well, to be able to get their kids and stuff from school.
Mm.
And so actually, if you're working, particularly if you're working in a team or in a group of people towards a common goal, is actually understanding those demands and kind of pressures that they have as well. That can actually make it really effective for that kind of compounding and team building.
Yeah, and what you're talking about there as well, in terms of meeting your goals and your agendas and being consistent, is I suppose you're beginning to highlight this idea of managing challenges as they come up, managing conflicts as they come up, managing life as it comes up. Just because you're doing something doesn't mean the world is going to click pause. There are going to be, say, shortages in staff. There are going to be difficulties in supply chains. Sometimes you're going to feel crap, and that's a challenge that you have to manage. And thinking about your energy levels, when are you more able to do things, when are you less able to do things, that's all part of that managing challenges. And the more challenges you begin to manage, the better or more competent you become to be. And it's that saying, a smooth sea never made a skilled sailor. And we see that in older, I suppose, contemporary references. So from psychodynamic psychologists like Freud and Erickson, who said that at every point, a young person, a child, and an adult, we go through a series of conflicts in our developmental stages. And if we can overcome the conflict, if we can show an inner resilience and conquer the I suppose, prevailing difficulty, we come out more fully realized, more skilled.
And it's all building, right? It goes back to what you were bringing in earlier of resilience. That ability to build that resilience, because you're almost setting yourself up to fail to assume that everything is going to be that smooth sailing. You know, you need to understand where your own limits are, check in with yourself as well, and know how you're feeling in that sense, because you can't always bring your A game. As much as people say, oh, you've got to bring it every day, right? There will be days when you wake up and you feel completely crap, and you have to know that for yourself. And that resilience of the storm piece, I think, will resonate with a lot of people, right? Because that's where wisdom comes, through that experience. You can't expect to build this resilience without having things happen. I think that's another key piece for people to be aware of, is that stuff will go wrong. You have to plan for that, and you have to learn from it, and you'll come back stronger from it. I tried for a little while, when I was getting lots of distractions, of just leaving an hour free in my calendar every day, because I went through a time blocking exercise. I was trying to be uber efficient, and I planned every single day out to the hour of what I was going to do. And I've heard people break it down even more. Elon Musk has apparently broken things down into like 5 to 15 minute chunks and just tasking like that. But anyway, I planned my whole day hour by hour. And by the third day, I just fell flat on its face, because all I'd done is I planned for what I want to be throughout there, right? Not taking into account that I lead a multitude of teams and other people. And therefore, I've got all of their demands coming back. And so actually you have to be kind of that resilience piece there. I learned very quickly that I just can't think in that sense. So it's just me and where I'm focusing. You have to kind of shape it to the environment that you're working or operating within.
Yeah. And that relates to what we were just saying a moment ago. Just because it's a priority to you doesn't mean it's a priority to everyone else. And sometimes when we become very goal-driven and task-orientated, we become very tunnel vision, and we almost forget other people. And it's making sure that sometimes you just got to slow down, and consider that other person. One of the things I want to come back to, or this idea that I'd like to come back to, is when it does go wrong, how do you talk to yourself? Not just you, but that's also a question for the listeners. It's like an observational question. So if you make a mistake, what do you do in your head? What do you say to yourself? Are you punishing?
The old me is a punisher, 100%. Used to be like, you idiot, right? And actually now, I kind of, you've definitely coined this phrase very well. It's the curious scientist. I come in and go, well, hold on a second. Like, what's gone on there? Why has that happened, right? And I think it's a lot easier for me to say that now, because where I set up strategies and look forward, it mostly is risk mitigation. So within reason, I am planning ahead a lot. I'm realising and seeing these things before they happen. So it's very rare now that things happen that in some way haven't been foreseen. And so I think I could be softer in myself in that way, because I've looked ahead more and I've kind of been aware of it. And I think that's a tool in itself. I mean, we're not talking to the extreme here. You can't overthink everything, right? There's a space of going too far ahead and overthinking. But actually, some foresight of, okay, what could go wrong around this and how do I plan for it? People phoning you up on a Teams meeting, distracting you, or, okay, I'm not going to feel okay. So I'm going to plan for having a bit of breathing space. And so when something does go wrong, it's like, okay, well, hold on a second. Why has it got wrong? But also leaving enough path in the road that I haven't got to the end of it.
One of the things I've been reflecting a lot on recently is sort of family narratives that we've developed about ourselves and how we take those forward, particularly in moments of resilience. One of the things that I think about quite a lot was messages that my mother would give me as a little boy, trying to achieve things or doing things. And often my family narrative was, we're Maynards, we don't give up. We keep going until we've achieved the task. And for a long time, that helped. That did work. But when you come against things that you can't control or that it's no longer possible to achieve that task, it keeps you marching forward doggedly and unproductively. And it just makes you feel bad. And sometimes we can adopt, I think, positive affirmations in our mind, what we think are positive at that moment. But realistically, it's quite harmful, particularly in situations that you can't control or you can't achieve the goal that you wanted to achieve. So when I think about resilience, I think about A, the family narratives. What have I grown up with when I'm achieving this? And B, does that fit the situation? So coming back into that mindfulness piece that you spoke about, that awareness piece, how am I speaking to myself? What aligns with what I'm doing? Am I feeling a bit trapped? What's going on here? So I've been thinking about that quite a lot. And I think a lot of people have to be aware of that element of when they're thinking about achieving something, thinking about their resilience and actually what lessons did you learn early on in life about achievement or doing something, or what's your core belief around that? What did others in your family tell you about yourself?
I think that's so true because especially when you're under that pressure, right? You won't necessarily think cognitively in that sense. You're going to fall back to the level of those systems that you've got. And that is in so many ways that product of your environment, right? That childhood or other things. Because I remember as well of a similar kind of family narrative of succeeding at all costs, right? And logically, my dyslexia takes that to the extreme. And actually that can be very, very damaging in itself. Very damaging. So I had to unpack that. And actually, you can still be successful, but control the controllables. That's the first, right? If you can't control it, let it go.
Yeah. There's a wonderful metaphor, and I think I've shared it before on air, but I'm going to share it again because it just feels so relevant. But just for this moment, I want you to imagine you're out to sea and you're on a boat. I want you to picture what your boat looks like, what color it is, how big it is. I want you to picture the sea and where you are. Now, while you're on your boat, I want you to think about what you can control. And can you control the sea? No, I don't think you can. Can you control the sky, the weather? You can't. And if there are other boats in your imagined scenario, can you control their boats? You can't control other people's boats. No. You can only control your own. So in that moment where the weather starts getting heavy, the storm clouds, or perhaps people are coming too close to you in their boat and you're rocking in their wake, the only thing you can do is either move away or pull up anchor. And it's recognizing what is in your capacity to manage and control, which is what you're saying, I think.
Yeah, that's really vivid. And I think the thing that you do there, right, is it's stepping out, stepping back. You're in this situation, you're under that pressure, it's muddy, you can't quite see what's going on, there's a storm, you're all caught up in it, right? But actually stepping back and saying, hold on a second, what's going on here? Okay. Out of interest, do you do similar? Have you found, or how do you deal with that kind of similar bit? Do you step out, or have you changed how you see things like that?
Oof. Well, I suppose for the longest time, it took me a long time and again, this comes back to processing. It took me the longest time to become aware of my own processing, just as a human being. How do I naturally tend to lean in situations? What are those default systems?
Yeah.
And I think now, generally speaking, I've always been quite an analytical person, but it's recognizing, are there faults in my analysis? Why am I trying to problem solve this thing? What's the agenda? What's the point? And so, yes, there is that element of stepping out of it, recognizing what I'm doing. And that might be through journaling. That might be taking myself through distraction, trying to taking myself away from the problem, thinking about what's going on, giving myself space and coming back to it with a fresh head. But I actually use a lot of mantras. Like I pointed out earlier, one of them was fantasy is the adversary to achievement. And so I use a lot of those as well. And, particularly, if someone's ticked me off, I might say something like,
wait, beep.
Yeah, exactly. But in that moment, I catch myself, or I try to catch myself, and I go, it's easy to assume malice when instead, ignorance or naivety is more likely a cause, or it's just an equal a cause. And I think that's another one that I think about. So, yeah, I do a combination of stepping out. I also think about famous metaphors or affirmations to get me through that situation. What about you? What do you do?
I think that's a really powerful build, actually, just to what you're saying there, because I very much step out and catch and analyse, but I like what you're saying there, because you're almost prompting yourself with those mantras. You're kind of almost trying to program that default setting, saying, hold on a second, this is what we're focused on, this is what we believe in. So I think that prompting piece for people, they might not have picked up on that subtlety there, right? But what we're saying there is it's not just stepping out and observing it, but then you're trying to then reinforce that positive, or it doesn't just have to be positive, but that piece that you're trying to say, actually, now, hold on a second, that
alternative way of seeing the problem.
Yeah, I really like that, because it's very easy to get muddied, isn't it?
And I think another thing that I've been trying to work on a lot more recently is something called the compassionate voice. So being compassionate not only to myself in sort of gaming situations or difficult situations, but also compassionate to others. And that's something that takes time to build. And something I've been thinking about a lot is there might be situations where you have to tell someone quite a harsh truth or a reality. And so I've been working on it in this context that candor without compassion is just brutality. And it's part of that compassionate kind of voice model, realistically, that actually, if you're going to tell someone their priorities has clashed with yours or about their agenda, whatever it might be, is that there are ways to do it. And you don't have to annihilate someone to tell them the truth. And that expression, candor without compassion, it's just brutality, is another way that I engage in that compassionate voice. To myself as well, because you can give yourself some hard truths, but you don't have to beat yourself up and torture yourself about the hard truths.
So true. It's so true. And sometimes we do, right? Sometimes I think we can all say we've caught ourselves and beat ourselves up. And I think that's a really key bit to kind of point out to people with consistency building, is that consistency doesn't mean doing it perfectly every single time there and again, right? Consistency is turning up. So the reason you have these mantras and the reason we give you these tools is for you to kind of go back and kind of, you can go back into it and go, well, hold on a second, that didn't quite work, or try again. Because I think it's all too easy for us to make some of these statements and then make sure people aren't misconstrued, right? That we all have to work on these things consistently. There isn't a point where you actually kind of achieve this perfectly polished form where you can be compassionate all the time, you can be observing all the time, you can be considerate, right? You're going to have days where you wake up and just feel ticked off. And so actually that in itself can be that. You can just wake up and say, hold on a second, I am feeling a bit more agitated today. And you just check in with yourself in that moment and say, right, I'm still going to do the best I can today, but I know I just need to be careful because I don't want to snap at someone, or I'm not going to be able to focus as much as I wanted to today. And the inverse is also true. If you've only set an hour aside to do something, but you're in a flow state, you just carry on. Go longer. Maximize how you're feeling and play with both of those, because I think it's all too easy to think, right, if I don't make this much progress and I do this every time, that you're not making progress. But actually, kind of the more you iterate and the more you practice, you'll just notice there's this huge exponential curve of your growth and development towards your goals. Or at least I've found that personally. I don't know whether you found similar.
Yeah, sometimes. One of the things, just listen to you speak there, it reminds me of this proverb I once heard. Or is it a proverb? Maybe a metaphor. But it's that bravery is this loud shout that says, I'm going to do it. Whereas courage is the whisper that says, I'm going to try. And if I don't do it today, I'll try again tomorrow. And I think if you're trying to be more consistent, be courageous. Don't say, I'm going to do it. Say, I'm going to try. And if I don't do it today, I'm going to try again tomorrow. I'm going to keep trying where I can.
I think that's so true, right? Because talking of mantras, actually, I think about this. This is one that I don't think I even realised fell into this vein. But I've changed my narrative on bigger tasks from I'm going to do this to, okay, today I'm just going to progress this. And I've kind of just brought it down a notch, right? In that sense of instead of having this big thing that I've just got to do, it's, okay, I'm going to try. I'm just going to progress. I'm just going to progress it. And actually what I've found is it's almost a little trick because I actually do more often than I thought I was. Because all I was doing that day, the only objective was to progress the thing. Not achieve the thing.
Yeah.
It's just progress the thing.
Progress it. And I think expectation is some of the heaviest weight anyone can hold. It reminds you of the Greek legend Atlas holding the world. He's holding the whole world and all their expectations. And sometimes you've got to step out from underneath that weight.
Can't carry it, right? It's all too easy to set that, and that is hard, right? When you set these big goals and you try and work consistently. We've used this reference before, but I think it's a very poignant one of the gym. Going to the gym once, you don't really see much change, but actually you have to consistently do it, and you'll see the change over time. And I do think there's a small argument, and someone will have to check the science on this, but I actually think going to the gym is one of the only places that you get an almost instantaneous feedback on what you could become. Because you get a pump, and so you get to see what the muscles look like, full of everything, and that is some instantaneous feedback in a way. Whereas nothing else really gives you instantaneous feedback, but it shows you where you could get to, and it lets you build that consistency. Whereas most other things, you just have to keep turning up, without you just got to get through those iterations. People talk about these 10,000 hours or 10,000 iterations. It's very hard to see that in the moment, but you just have to keep turning up on the belief that one day you will get there.
I think the gym is so pertinent to this conversation, not just as a literal activity that you do, but more as a metaphor. Because if you go to the gym and you lift way too much weight, so you try and bench, 365 pounds, you're going to seriously injure yourself. You'll cripple yourself. And it's a good lesson. You have to start small. It's not just saying, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to start lifting. No, you're going to start small. You're going to start by perfecting your form. Realistically, that's what you're going to do. Then you might do some weights. So you might just focus on pure calisthenics. And that's fine. And you might then start with just the bar. And that's fine too. It's all right to be a beginner. Ignore the Instagram hype where someone's going, oh yeah, look at me do this triple backflip off of the treadmill onto the bench press. Aren't I great? It doesn't matter. That's not you. That's not your journey. And you can apply that logic to whatever you're doing. Get your foundations right and then move forward.
100%. I think that's so vivid to people. You've got to get those foundations and you can build from there. So I like how you brought that reference in with the gym, because I could think back to my 16-year-old self. I definitely didn't take that advice. It was bench as much as you could and lift as much as you could.
Yeah. I saw a tweet the other day that was something like, at 16, I benched 180 pounds or something like that. And I thought I would bench 300 and whatever. Because I don't really know pounds. I tend to do kgs. But he says some ridiculous number. And he goes, but now that I'm 30, I realise I'll never bench 180 again. And that's because he overshot how much he could bench at 16.
It's so true. It's so true. But that's such a good metaphor, as you say, for everything else, right? Because you can go too far. But it's funny. I think we all do that because we think that's what's going to show us the progress. When you're doing that minutiae and you're kind of breaking it up and doing bits bit by bit, you don't really get to see that bigger bit of process. We all are afraid of doing it slowly in that sense, I think, in some ways, because we want to get there as fast as you can and as quick as you can, right? But we've talked about this before. It's enjoying the journey, not the outcome.
And it comes back to progress is incremental, always. But I think thinking about it generally, the age that we live in, that kind of methodology is not appreciated. And to come back to the gym, you see it with tren, you see it with performance enhancing drugs for physical sports. People don't want to put in the time to discipline that. For whatever reason, I can only hazard a guess at their rationale and their agendas. But the society we live in is about now, right now. And I suppose what we always try to do in our podcast is help people disconnect from that. Because that kind of living, and I'm not trying to be judgmental, but it comes back to that young man trying to lift 180 pounds in a bench press or whatever it is, something ridiculous. That kind of living doesn't do you any good, not in the long run. And it's thinking about life as a long game rather than a short and reckless one. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
It's a marathon, not a sprint, right? That reminds me, and I'm pretty sure you put this on it's on our story right now, so timely in some sense, but it won't be timely by the time this drops, right? But there's a Japanese proverb of don't be afraid of going slowly, be afraid of standing still. And people are afraid of going slowly. We want it now. Amazon Primes and all of this, order everything now. I even caught myself doing it today with ordering some SD cards for my drone. It was like, if I can't have it now, well, I'll just get something else. And it's like, no, hold on a second. You can wait 3 or 4 days. Like it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to have a barber called Pierre. Shout out to Pierre. Best haircuts in sort of the Harlow region. But one of the things he told me when he was cutting my hair, and he was doing my lineup, and he went, the key to a good haircut is time. And then he went, the problem is people are in a rush to do nothing. And I think about that every single day. And when I catch myself rushing, I'm like, am I in a rush to do nothing? So I've saved 2 minutes of time to do what? Great. And so, yeah, are you in a rush to do nothing?